Good morning and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if Santa Claus was real. Since we are close to Christmas, I thought why not making a special video about the Santa Claus. Granted, What If Althist he already made such a video once, and I want to throw in my own version of it. So let's discuss who or what the Santa Claus is in my own perception or in this alternate history. Okay, first of all, I want to say that in my country or in my culture, we don't have Santa Claus. We would actually have the Clasian, who is Saint Nicholas. And these figures, they can be intertwined, they can be kind of the same or maybe not, depending on whom you will ask. However, since we are here on a more international platform and I have an international audience, I will thus continue with the Santa Claus. So, who is Santa Claus? Santa Claus is a magical being, so in this timeline, we would have some forms of magic. Everything related to the Santa Claus would be magical or have some magical proportions. The Santa Claus, he would live on the North Pole, and he would be someone or a creature or being with incredible speed, distributing presents all over the world in merely a few hours. Or he would just have the most advanced technology, and maybe he would just be the most advanced being as well, or the most evolved being. Of course, he wouldn't do everything on his own. He would also have magical beings as his assistants, the elves, but because they are working for him and not on their free choice, they would be something akin to slaves. Moreover, they are different from humans, but they would be humanoids. This means that Earth would not just have Homo sapiens sapiens, but they would also have an Homo alphensis. Yeah, I just invented that name. The Santa Claus would have reindeers on the North Pole with him, but they would be captured reindeers, magical reindeers, or even immortal reindeers. The Santa Claus would also be immortal and live since all eternity. In our world, however, there is of course no Santa Claus, and countries that have the Santa Claus, a magical being in their culture, aren't that numerous. But if we include Saint Nicholas, that Moros, or Father Christmas, we actually have a vast part of the world that includes this figure in their culture. So what if all of that changed? What if Santa Claus really existed? First of all, humanity would be totally altered. I mean, think of it for a second. You know that a powerful and important and even immortal being lives somewhere up in the north, gives you presents consistently, and has a high-speed magical beings and human-like assistants. Religions in that timeline, they would be very different or just not exist at all, and the world would follow the cult of Santa Claus or the cult of Christmas. The Santa Claus would be the god for humanity because if they behave well, they would get presents no matter what. That's our next issue here, presents. What does it imply? Well, imagine humanity would just know that on a specific day of the year, they get free stuff, presents, whatever they wish to get. Would they be motivated to do anything? Not really. Humanity in this alternate timeline, they would be more lazy. Technology would not really make a big jump as it did in our timeline. Cultures, they wouldn't compete so much with each other because of the Santa Claus and the reassurance that he gives presents every year. And as a result, in this alternate timeline, technology would be far behind because of this reassurance that resources would be given in form of presents. What about human cultures? Languages, they would be different. Certain traditions and ways of life, they would also be different depending on the geographical location. But most of the topics, they would be treated in a very repetitive way. I mean, just think of it. The Santa Claus exists. He is someone who is very fast, who gives presents, who gives stuff, who has magical beings. So it's very normal that humanity, they would have a culture based around him. And of course, there is the cult of Christmas or the Santa Claus. So this means that the Santa Claus would appear in most of the songs, poems, books, paintings, and most of the artistic expressions. They would be made about him, Santa Claus only. What's up, guys? Sorry for the little interruption, but I'm sure you have noticed that on my channel I have many videos that are scheduled for like 1 week, 2 weeks, or even 3 weeks. If you are really impatient, if you can really not hold yourself, and if you really must see these videos, please subscribe on my Patreon. There are various options which you can take. I'm sure you will find the most adequate option for yourself. And also please go down, check the links below for my Facebook page and also for my TikTok as well as for my Twitter account. And now let's go back to the alternate history video. This also means that critical thinking would not be more widespread, as there would be no reason for it, and humanity would lack a lot of creativity as well. Religions, okay, they were bad in many ways, and they were responsible for the killing of many people. But, believe it or not, religion was also in some way or another responsible for critical thinking. I mean, if you get a phrase in the Bible, or maybe you take some quotes of the Quran, or maybe of the Torah, there are different interpretations of it, right? And just for the fact that you can have different interpretations of the same phrases means that you will have a lot of critical thinking only based on religion. So if you spread it also into other institutions, you get more and more critical thinking. But in this timeline, as there is just one cult, the cult of Santa Claus, thus critical thinking would not be really developed. The elves, they would be treated like slaves by Santa Claus, and I don't think that they would even have a choice whether they would work for him or not. I imagine something akin to the caste system, but for the elves, where every elf would be born for one specific function. They may be changed of position, and if the Santa Claus would want to, they could change their caste, but this would be the exceptions in here. If Santa Claus was able to make presents out of thin air, we may just see him on the North Pole. He would live in isolation, but have the biggest impact of all people out there in the world. Literacy could be high because although the technological level would be low, people would need to send their letters or even somehow communicate what they wish to get as a present. And because of that, postal services, they would also exist in this timeline and be very well developed. Even jobs like a messenger or jobs related to transportation and even infrastructure, they would be existent in here. Cities could also develop along those communication lines, and human settlements, they would be closer to the north because they want to reach the Santa Claus. And with all of the free time, one could think that population would rise, but no. Due to the low level in technology and science, people would die very young, and many mothers could die when they give birth. So just for this one important key change in here, the population would be much lower. If Santa Claus would need resources from Earth, because he could actually not produce presents out of thin air, well, this means that Earth would be in trouble. The Santa Claus would possess territories outside of the North Pole, and with his immortality, slave army of elves and magic, he would be invincible and take whatever territory would be needed for the creation of the presents. The Earth would become Santa's playground, basically. With that said, many people would be displaced, killed or attacked, or they would just accept to move away because the Santa Claus, he's anyway very powerful, and if he says something, you just follow his command. The elves, they would do the jobs, and no human whatsoever would perform any of this labor that the elves would do. Yes, there could be rebels perhaps against the Santa Claus here and there, but due to the overwhelming power of him, they would just be killed or displaced. The Santa Claus would give whatever the people want once per year, but in exchange, he would basically rule the world with his elves, and he would outlive them all. The presents would make people more lazy, and technology would progress very slowly. the population wouldn't be high, and only an economy related to the Santa Claus would exist and a minor one between the people themselves. This world could go two ways. Either the world would mostly remain divided, and despite the laziness, humans would have empires and try to reach the North Pole, which would be more important than Mecca and Jerusalem combined. Or Santa Claus would rule over the world directly and indirectly as a god figure. The world in this alternate timeline would be worse, less progressive, miserable, and humans would lose all the drive, all the motivation, while Santa Claus would rule over the planet with his elves and reindeers, and all of that because of Christmas and the presents he would give once per year. And that's where we leave it for now.
That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Alt History.